Hello, it's Richard Pears, and today I'm with FinextraTV, and we're doing one of our Predictions 2023 series. And I'm joined by Liz Field. Liz is the CEO of PIMFA. They are the Personal Investment Management and Financial Advice Association. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, Liz. And you?
Yes,
all
thank
good?
you. All
We
good,
were
thank
saying
you.
it's freezing cold, though.
It is freezing. It is freezing.
We're locked away in our bunkers. But we're here today not to talk about the weather. We want to know a little bit more about PIMFA, what your role is, and obviously moving on from that introduction, your concerns, your issues, your trends that you're seeing for 2023, with a bit of a feel for the tech as it plays through your industry. So give us a go at that one, if you will.
Okay, no problem. So PIMFA, we try not to say the full thing, but PIMFA is the trade association for the personal investment management and financial advice industry. So it does what it says on the tin, and what that means is we champion our sector. We identify best practice and disseminate that amongst the industry, and we champion on behalf of all of their issues, whether that is with government or with regulator and other stakeholders. So a bit of a kind of a broker in between of the challenges the industry and potential solutions. And perhaps I ought to just scope out a little also, though, about what the industry is, because wealth management is traditionally seen as private banking. And yes, we do have private banking within our sector and within the UK. But the UK is actually is quite a unique model of wealth management and advice, very intermediated model compared to Europe, for example. So yes, we have private banks, we have wealth management arms of retail banks, we have large firms that would call themselves wealth managers, as well as medium and small. We have financial advisors, large, medium and small, and networks, all sorts of kind of direct to consumer kind of vehicles, platforms, services to help individuals save and invest for their financial future. But they are predominantly small to medium-sized enterprises. So they're not the big beasts. There's on a hand, maybe into a second hand, could I say that they are large firms? They are predominantly small to medium-sized firms. But looking after 1.6 trillion of assets under management and huge potential for growth. You asked about concerns, issues, challenges. So I think if we looked inside first, so we had our CEO strategy day not that long ago, and they talked about, I asked what keeps them awake at night, and the three issues that they said were of prime concern. First is takeovers. So this is, there's a lot of consolidation happening in our industry. There's also a lot of private equity funding that's coming into our industry. Again, I think because it's an attractive place, business in which to invest. Technology, which we'll come on to in a minute. And the third was talent, not least of all tech talent and individuals having digital skills. But if we then looked outside of the industry and just look at some of the challenges that are facing, this industry. So we do have shifting demographics, the upcoming transfer of wealth to a whole new type of investor. We look at millennials and others who are taking a very active and serious look at sustainable finance, for example. It's a highly regulated industry, so increased regulation and costs is a perennial challenge for firms. And how do we comply? Then you've got new business models and changing patterns that all make this a very, very dynamic industry in which to work. But very specifically on the tech challenges, I think there are four. The first is we've got legacy systems, and how do we adapt legacy systems within this sector? The second is budget and resources. As I say, they're predominantly small to medium-sized organisations, notwithstanding what we are seeing and what we're envisaging investment coming into the industry. A concern about cybersecurity. All firms face the client whether that is face-to-face or digital. So being cyber resilient is of paramount importance. And the fourth, which I've already alluded to, is about regulation, highly regulated. So needing the tools and the talent and the wherewithal to cope with ever-changing regulation. If we mentioned ESG, that is one alone, which is going to, see some growth over the course of the next, few years. That is just one aspect.
So a lot of challenges.
Huge.
How are you going about addressing them?
So I think COVID, in many respects, the pandemic, in many respects, kind of accelerated the digital transformation and tech changes that were needed. It's not unique to our sector, but it absolutely meant for our sector going home with, and then within, immediately needing to speak to clients and service clients, things that might have taken months, even years to make a decision on, just had to be made. The decisions had to be made, but also with a view to the long term. So if we have an opportunity now to do something for the now, how can we make that so that it's from it kind of stands the test of time. So that advancement in digital and tech transformation has just continued. So we're seeing firms that have actively speeded up their vendor solutions. We've got some that have already got vendor solutions in place and are also thinking about how to outsource components of their IT infrastructure. So that's an opportunity. Very few will prefer to build in-house. So I think that is a huge opportunity for vendors in this space to come in and provide some service and support to our firms.
Indeed. And now you did a survey recently, which is always a good sort of straw poll of what's happening in the industry about the Wealth Tech project. Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, firstly, the Wealth Tech project it was in response to what are the key things that keep you awake at night, technology being one of them. So we thought, well, what can we do as a trade association to help firms? In conjunction with an associate, we developed a marketplace, what we're calling PIMFA Wealth Tech, and at its heart, it is a marketplace. So you have potential solutions across the whole of the value chain, excuse me, whether that is prospecting, onboarding, right the way through to analytics and reporting, and all points in between. We wanted to kind of attract fintech and existing tech to sit in the marketplace, so that at the very least firms could see who's doing what, and where there are potential opportunities and solutions to the problems that they face. The second aspect about it, though, is that we would look at industry problems which are predominantly common across the industry, and see where as an association, as a solution, PIMFA Wealth Tech could look at the issues as a whole, and use the fintech and tech brains to help address some of those challenges. So the questionnaire that we did, the survey that we did, was to try and get to the nub of, so what are the problems that you're really kind of focusing on? But there were three questions which I thought might be of interest. The first was, firstly, across a whole range of areas, which would the firms consider using a technological solution for? So where were they, hoping that a fintech would be able to help them? 66% client onboarding and experience, followed closely by client analytics and reporting, big data and analytics, side by side with automation. So those were the four areas that they said, actually, if there's a tech solution, those are the areas that we think we would consider getting us some support. The second question was around, well, okay, What are your priorities for tech spends then? Client onboarding and experience, 75%. Automation, 54%. Followed by client analytics and reporting, followed by cloud, cybersecurity, pretty much even Stevens with cloud infrastructure. So 5 areas there where actually those are the priority areas for spending money on tech. And then the final area was actually then, given that that's where you need some support, that's where you would think you were going to spend your money, where do you think you're going to get the biggest gains from tech applications? Not unsurprisingly then, given that client onboarding and experience was number one, and the other two, client onboarding and profiling onboarding, 75%, 58% client acquisition, prospect management, client report, followed by client reporting and analytics after sales, and then advice and distribution. So the industry is ripe for development. It wants development. It needs development, given its changing dynamics of clients. Soon we will be getting rules in relation to ESG and advice. So that's going to start to accelerate exponentially. ESG reporting and analytics, we can see, will be a big theme for firms. But it's wanting to spend money on tech. It needs to spend money on tech, and they are open for business, as is PIMFA Wealth Tech now. So the marketplace has been built. So if anybody has got any interest in coming into what is actually quite a dynamic industry, ripe for change, and is changing anyway, it needs some support from a tech perspective, then just contact us.
Fantastic. I always wonder sometimes, of course, everybody always wants the customer experience and the onboarding to be improved, because of course that's the sharp interface with the people that pay the bills. But of course, you've got to make sure that your back office operations and data and products are going to meet that demand when you hit the interface of the high-speed on-ramp that you've now created.
Well, that's right, exactly. It would be like having the front page of an app and getting into it and then find there's nothing underneath it. It does need the full spectrum. It needs some support. And as I said, we've got new types of clients wanting something digital, wanting something dynamic. And even, I think about my dad, and the stuff. I mean, he's so tech savvy, 80-year-old, and it's brilliant. There's a lot more because they've got time on their hands. Well, they need something equally just as much as our kids do. So
well, it's finding the right thing. And I think it's, the sort of keyboard warriors of all ages and generations. It's just their propensity for tech, isn't it, really, rather than their age. Often they're looking for a way to really drill in and see whether that ESG product is an ESG product, and sort of hit a wall of PDFs, and it feels frustrating. So it's great to hear that you're embracing this challenge, and that your marketplace, which I think is a super way of actually bringing in and crowding in the innovation of the fintech industry. And so, we hear the rallying cry, and hopefully people will be signing up for your marketplace. But for now, Liz, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Good to talk to you, Richard.